who follow this channel probably know that I'm quite into triads. Even just basic triads, 1, 3, 5 on the chords, can be very useful resources for mapping changes. For instance, rhythm changes. There's a lot you can do with just those basic notes. I do find a lot of the time I find myself wishing for more as good as that is, and as clear as that is for outlining the harmony. That was Stellar by Starlight, by the way, if you didn't hear it. I find myself often wishing for a bit more variety. So one of the easiest ways of doing this is just to add a note. And there's an advantage to using just 4 notes as opposed to, say, 7 notes. You can map them much closer to just the basic triad just by adding a note, and that you can access them much quicker. And you know that it's going to be, I suppose, less information to deal with as the changes whiz by. So the most common note to add to a triad in jazz is, of course, the 7th or the 6th. But today I'm going to talk about adding the 2nd, because I think it's a remarkably common melodic device that gets used all the time. And these things are called variously, I've heard them called tetrachords, because they're 4 notes. So like pentatonic tetrachords, because it's the first, for instance, the major one is the first 4 notes of the like major pentatonic scale. You know, you could call, if you wrote them down as a chord, it'd be a major or minor add 9. Or I've also heard them called by Stephen Harris and his student Jordan Clements. I've heard them called quadrads as opposed to triads, you know, like 4 as opposed to 3. And I don't mind any of those names. I think I'll just call them quadrads today, just because that's what I'm used to calling them. And indeed, if you want any more information on this and similar ideas, I would definitely check out Jordan Clements. He has a YouTube channel which has some stuff on it, which I'll attach a link to, and it should pop up somewhere around these parts in a minute. But I'm just going to talk about the major and minor add 9 today. There's other things you can do as well, and I will leave that as an exercise in imagination to the curious student. But I just want to sort of point out all the cool stuff that you can do with these basic quadrads. And usually I've seen them taught as a way through difficult chord changes. So a typical example would be giant steps, for instance. You know, so a giant step cycle going like D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, for instance. You know, you would go you know, it's a way of, you know, or if I do the whole cycle, you know, that kind of thing, right? Barry taught it over, at least to me, taught it over the last turnaround of Lady Bird or Half Nelson. This is called a Tad Dameron turnaround. It's a good substitute, by the way, if you ever want to substitute for a 1-6-2-5. And usually when the 5th is in the melody. And it goes like this. You have a simplest version, you have a C major 7th, it goes to an E flat major 7th, it goes to a flat major 7th, possibly with a sharp 11th, and then D flat major 7th with a sharp 11th, then back to C major. You can also do this version where you have a dominant chord on the second one, and then a dominant chord here, D flat 7, sharp 11th. Both versions, it kind of depends what's in the melody as to which version you use. Both versions get used. But in terms of our quadrads, our 4-note pitch set, it doesn't matter because there's no 7th. So we can use them over a major or a dominant equally. And then you end up with something more like this. If I just play them in order, the sound might be slightly more familiar. So this is kind of a very, Barry suggested like doing all different permutations of this 4-note pitch set, because all the notes sound kind of nice. There's no funny notes, like there's no fourths or anything over the major chord, but you do have a more colourful notes. So the reason why I think it's so useful for improvising is you have, on one hand, these, you know, quite boring chord tones. Nothing wrong with that, but you also have this slightly cheeky or a note which isn't quite as just boring standard as the other ones. So you have already just with these 4 notes a kind of, you can create an element of slight tension there, which can make it more interesting to use for soloing. And I think like this is a really, if I just sort of go through some occurrences of this major ninth arpeggio, the melody of How High the Moon sort of comes to mind right away. So it's major then minor. Yeah, that's just that. The way Parker plays Star Eyes, although I don't think this is exactly the original melody, but he goes. It's that again. When he comes to the bridge, there's that. That Coltrane figure as well. And then the next chord resolves to that one. So, and then it does again. Something like that. It's just like a really common melodic device. Dexterity and Anthropology both start with this. That figure, right? You often see figures like this as well in bebop lines and Charlie Christian and 2, where you kind of get a that's not running through the notes sequentially, but it's just a D minor and add 9 coming down to the 1. This seems to be a really common melodic figure. The example that springs to mind is the first little riff of A Night in Tunisia. We've got that B flat major ninth with our lower neighbour tone. Okay? So really, really common. Not often talked about beyond the sort of context, or at least in my experience, but beyond the sort of context of just like, this is a way you can play giant steps, you know? But I think these are much more useful and much more widely used, just because I think this is a very useful little fragment of information. So what I want to do is move on quickly from that and talk mostly about the minor add 9, which I think is a more interesting sound, possibly because it has this dark semitone in it. So for instance, C minor. And that seems to evoke a minor really nicely without necessarily kind of either making it super dark by adding a major 7th or kind of more kind of, I don't know, that sound is almost pushing towards dominant, or the minor 7th, which just sounds like a neutral kind of passive chord. This add 9 sound to me sounds like sort of the minor sound, but just like a little bit enriched by the addition of this. You know, and of course, a very common sound in like rock, you know. Welcome, my son. Welcome to the... Yeah. Or, alternatively, major and minor add 9s. But then, you know, the more I kind of learn about jazz, the more I just think like there's a continuity between jazz and popular music harmony. In terms of voicings, we wouldn't necessarily we can't really cluster these notes together in a way that like Bill Evans could on the piano. So one thing which is quite a nice procedure to do this, and I learned this from Jordan Clemens, is just to take the notes and sort of miss the second one out from the top. So that ends up, I'm just going to put some voicings up which use this logic. So instead of going, we do that. Old memes are the best memes. We get that one. And then if we go down to, we get that. Ooh, that's a scrunchy one. Ooh, lovely voicings going all the way down. Yeah. So I'll put those up on the screen anyway, so you've got those voicings to muck around with. But that's the logic behind them. We're just missing out the second note from the top, just because we can't really play it on the guitar. And that ends up, I like this one particularly. These kind of voicings are. This is like a major 7th shell voicing. You know, they're just really nice. Just really like those. So you can always use them as voicings. But we can also substitute the minor for all the places that we would normally do for like a melodic minor, or if you're a Barry Harris aficionado, a minor sixth diminished scale. So for instance, if you have a dominant chord, G7 say, you could either play the important minor, which is the D minor. That works nicely with that. Or you could tritone substitute it and get the A flat minor, which is a minor half step up. Which gives you more of an altered sound, or a tritone substitution sound. And that's the same relationships that you'd use with a melodic minor as well. So it's no different if you're a chord scale person or a Barry Harris person. These work the same way. Similarly for half diminished. So if I could do like a B minor 7 flat 5 here, I would substitute that for a minor third higher. In this case, that would be D minor. And then I could go, which is the F minor add 9. And then it's a really nice way to play a 2-5-1. I'll do that again. And it sounds kind of bebop-y as well, don't you think? You know, right away. Even though I'm not using like any of the kind of bebop notes, like the 7th really, you know. I'm just kind of using these kind of more open sounds. And I think it's surprising how often Charlie Parker and people like that do this. You know, I'll just give you an example. This is going from a tritone substitute dominant to a minor. This is not in Tunisia, so we've got the E flat 7 here, for which we substitute the B flat minor add 9, and we're going to do a lower neighbour tone. Apart from that first note, that's all B flat minor add 9. Lower neighbour tone to a chord tone of D minor. So could have the D minor add 9 arpeggio in as well. Those sounds, by the way, are very common in gypsy jazz too. You hear that a lot. And indeed Baroque music. Obviously you can now sort of widen this out to include voicings. So for instance, for our Night in Tunisia thing. So we can go, this is an E flat bass with the B flat minor add 9, isn't it nice? We could go, it's almost like a sort of sus sound if I add that in. There's no third there, which I like. And then we do the same thing for this. Never think of that as being a dominant sound, would you? If I do a full 2-5-1 with the second chord being a tritone substitution, so we'll do it in D minor, so we'll go E minor 7 flat 5, which relates to G minor add 9. Cool, huh? So you can also see how that opens some windows into, I think, quite Bill Evans-y sort of harmony. He really liked this kind of stuff. I'm just going to sort of end by just kind of going through the first few chords of Stella by Starlight using this principle. So again, we're going to use G minor add 9 there. And then C. Major, right, for the dominance. So on, right? So I think there's a lot there to explore just using these 4-note pitch collections. Anyway, I hope you find that interesting and useful. Thanks for watching.